Hello and welcome to another episode of Boom and Bust. I'm your host, Tony Clement. I am here at the News Forum where all voices matter. Today's guest is the Honorable Joe Oliver. He is a former finance minister and natural resources minister and member of parliament in the Harper government. Joe joins us on a regular basis. Joe, it's good to have you here.
Great to be with you.
I guess, obviously, I do want to start with the military operation by the United States and Israel, their operations against Iran. First of all, give us your impression of the impacts of this on the world scene.
Well, we don't know, of course, how what ultimately will happen, whether there will be a regime change. But I think this was overall a very positive development, which will have, I think, significant repercussions in the region and beyond. We're talking here about a genocidal, theocratic regime which financed international terrorism, resulted in the loss of lives of Americans, Israelis, and many others, the oppression of its own people, most recently in death, in the murder, really in the tens of thousands. I mean, we hear a number of 30,000. I heard something much higher than that, and so the elimination of the top leadership, and hopefully, but not by no means certainly, the a regime change would have a very positive impact on the region and beyond. It could, at best, I suppose, result in a longer term peace in the region, a reconciliation to some degree between the Sunnis and the Shiites, a removal of an existential threat to Israel, an expansion potentially of the Abraham Accords, less need for a military presence, and of course for the really hard pressed and brutalized Iranian people a hopeful and democratic future. That's the upside. The downside is it goes on for a long time and the regime is not overturned. But one thing we do know with certainty, and that is that it's been terribly weakened and it continues to be further weakened. And so its ability to be a repressive regime and to finance and support terrorism around the region and beyond has been greatly diminished.
I think one of the things that's also happened, Joe, is the regionalization of the war. Iran's response to the initial attacks is to attack Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Bahrain, Qatar, and so on. So, what do you make of that?
Well, at one level, it seems quite irrational because some of the countries that you mentioned were not unfriendly, and in the case of Qatar, which is for a long time been a supporter of the Muslim Brotherhood, I thought there was a tie-in there, which has now been severed, and these countries are beyond angry and are talking incredibly of joining the American-Israeli kinetic actions. Now, I don't know that it's going to go that far, but they've alienated countries, important regional countries that were neutral or even to some degree on their side. So it's in one sense it's inexplicable, and the reason I can come up with is that they were by expanding it, they were trying to put pressure on the Americans to stop because of a concern that it may, get out of hand regionally and beyond. So, but I think they've miscalculated very badly, and the countries they've attacked, not surprisingly, are quite angry about it and have shifted their allegiance or their neutrality.
Yeah, and I think we've got about 30 seconds before the break here, but other countries that were standoffish are now being drawn in, like the UK and France.
That's right, and then when I know we're going to get into this, what Canada's response to all
Yes.
this has been and should be, but we're not there yet. But I'm very cautiously hopeful about what the result of this military attack will ultimately be.
Well, we'll get into Canada and its response after the break. We'll be back after these messages.